Today, we step back to a time when monochromatic and color screens lived together in harmony, and no one had quite figured out what the best mouse substitute was on a laptop, or even the best location for the pointing device for that matter. This is the AST Advantage NB46SX/33. It's powered by the Intel 486SX processor running at 33 MHz and was originally paired with 4 MB of RAM, although this one's been upgraded to 8. For storage, it sports a 120 MB hard drive, and external storage is handled via the 3.5-inch 1.44 MB floppy drive on the right-hand side of the unit. It has a 10-inch 640x480 VGA display, which is monochromatic, coupled with a graphics chipset that's capable of 256 colors. And while information was a bit sparse, it looks like this unit came out around the end of 1993 and had a suggested retail price of $1,800 US. That's about $3,400 by today's standards. The keyboard is pretty small, but it's still surprisingly comfortable to type on. The buttons aren't mechanical or anything, it's just responsive and feels pretty good to the fingers. And one of its most standout features is the integrated trackball. Located just above the keyboard, the ball still rolls mostly smoothly, and the two action buttons below it are nice and clicky. It's small and functional and kind of cute. But for the majority of this video, I'll be using an external mouse. When I bought this laptop, it came with a Logitech mouse that's in the shape of, well, a mouse. But unfortunately, it also kind of looks like it's been chewed on by a mouse, so I'll be sticking with this Microsoft Serial mouse instead. On the left-hand side of the laptop, we have an integrated modem, which is most likely a 14.4 baud model. It's completely modular and is accessible via the sliding door beside the trackball. For additional ports, the Advantage has most of the ports you'd find standard on laptop offerings at the time. Serial, parallel, VGA, and PS2 mouse ports are all accounted for. And when not plugged in, the Advantage can be run off of its internal 14.4-volt NiCad battery pack. These days, it holds just enough power to let you plug it back in if you tripped over the power cable, but back when it was new, you would expect to get a couple hours out of it. Well, let's get it powered on and see what it can do. The BIOS is pretty basic and is also pretty standard for what you'd expect at the time. One option that's offered is the ability to invert the LCD, swapping black for white and vice versa. You end up making pretty heavy use of this feature depending on the software or game you want to use to get the maximum viewability out of it. This machine is still running the original operating system it came with, which is Microsoft DOS 6.2, coupled with an AST-branded install of Windows 3.1. In terms of installed software, it's pretty Spartan. It looks like it's mostly just the original operating system itself and an installation of Corel WordPerfect. As a word processing unit, it works quite well. I'm not going to break any speed records typing on it, but the screen is clear and the keyboard is fine to type on. This would definitely have been fine for getting some work done on the go. In terms of games installed, well, there wasn't much on it when I got it. Solitaire and Minesweeper are there, but it doesn't look like any others have been added. Well, before I started messing with it, I installed my parallel port zip drive and used it to back up the restore directory, just in case the drive on this machine ends up failing and I need to replace it. Then it was time to move on to installing some of my own games. I picked up this laptop because it reminded me of the one my mom would sometimes borrow from one of her friends when she needed to type a document before we got a computer of our own. And one of the games I discovered on it early on was Leisure Suit Larry. This game is definitely not safe for work, as the whole goal is to help the main character Larry, let's say, become a man. But playing it on here immediately brought back memories of sneaking around to play this game on that borrowed laptop as a kid, hoping not to get caught. And at some point, as a kid, I stumbled across a demo for a game called EGA Trek. Probably walking the borders of copyright infringement, this was the first Star Trek game I ever played on a computer. Playing it on the black and white screen proved a challenge, however, as the grid that displays the galaxy uses color coding to let you know where planets, bases, and enemies are. So I ended up having to guess quite a bit. And of course, we have to try a Commander Keen game. And this is where the lacking refresh speed of the type of display used on this becomes apparent. This technology dates back to before active TFT displays became prevalent, and it was never really meant for this type of high-speed action. Side-scrollers end up being a bit of a blurry mess as you make your way through the levels, and while not entirely unplayable, it's definitely not ideal. While I try out Planet X3, I want to take a moment to welcome all the new subscribers that have joined the channel over the past month. It's great to have you all here, and I promise there's a ton more retro hardware and software coming your way. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe too, that way you won't miss any of it. Planet X3 runs quite well on this machine, and since it's targeted for older machines with less supportive displays, it's not too much of a surprise that it finds itself right at home here. One thing that's lacking for retro gaming on machines like this is an integrated sound card. For DOS games, this means the best you can do is the PC speaker for music and sound. But in Windows, you have a little more flexibility. The PC speaker driver allows you to play wave audio using the PC speaker, so while you can't use it for MIDI playback, you can still get some basic sound effects out of Windows games and applications. Just make sure to enable interrupts or your mouse is going to freeze every time it plays a sound. Next, I thought, why not try out some early DOS console emulation? So I started with one of the first Nintendo emulators, Nesticle. Of course, we're still stuck with monochromatic graphics and no sound, but gameplay on this machine is pretty close to full speed. Even if it is a little slow, without sound, it's not all that noticeable. And for a splash of color, we can always connect an external display since the Advantage is capable of doing 256 colors at 640 by 480. The next emulator I tried was the No Money Game Boy emulator. I figured a black and white handheld with a slow blurry screen would probably play to the strengths of the Advantage. And yeah, this looks and feels pretty much just how it did on the original console with a little less green tint to it, and the speed seems to be pretty good. Of course, the other lacking feature for great emulation is the ability to use an external gamepad. Due to the I/O on this machine not including a joystick port and coming in far too early for USB support, you'll be limited to playing on the keyboard alone. And as you've probably noticed during this video, the screen is not in top form. It experiences flickering and weird ghosting from other objects on the screen. These issues don't occur on an external display when connected, so it's most likely some failing capacitors around the internal display that are causing the issue. If you guys want to see a teardown and recap in the future, make sure to let me know in the comments below. Overall, the Advantage is a pretty capable little laptop. It's not a great candidate for retro gaming with its slow response display and lack of internal sound card, but if you're satisfied with the PC speaker and willing to connect an external display for faster paced offerings, then this type of machine may serve you well. Hey, that's it for this one, and thanks as always for watching until the end. And I'll see you again in a couple of weeks on another Print and Play retrospective.